if y'all notice another rookie mistake. Forgot to switch to the offering slide there. When Jason was, he and I were talking about John being out, and I think I told him it was his turn. He told me he's going to be out too. It came down to me, I guess. I do appreciate the honor, again, of standing before you. I do understand the weight that comes along with it, and don't take that lightly. So I do appreciate, again, the opportunity and your attendance here this morning. I know Peggy joked with me last week. She told me she wasn't going to be here, and she said, "I really don't have anything to do with you preaching next week." So I do appreciate each and every one of you being here, and I'll bring that up a little bit through the message. When they asked me, I looked at the date, and I said, July 7th? Well, that's 3 days after July 4th. I think I'll take that opportunity to talk about the United States and unity. So I kind of gathered my thoughts for that. And a couple of weeks ago, John was talking about wrapping up his Women in the Bible series. And I don't know if you called it, but the next series is going to be on unity. I said, well, scrap that one, threw that one out. I wasn't going to jump in front of the preacher and get shown up like that, you know. So many times I've taught a Sunday school lesson on the same scriptures as the preacher. And I thought, well, why didn't I say it like that? So I didn't want to feel like that in the coming weeks in July. So I did, in full disclosure, pick a lesson that I've been studying a little bit. I think maybe since the passing of my mom, I've been thinking about this a little bit more. Definitely as my children get older, I think about this a little bit, and I think about legacy and making a difference and making sure that I fit in what I need to fit in their lives so that they'll remember me in a way, and others may do the same. So the title of today's lesson is Make a Difference. And again, it's been something that's been on my mind a lot. Jason and I have had some discussions about the church and about making disciples and not church members. And again, so it comes a lot from the studies and discussions and things I've had in the last several months. And so we'll start out with a little story. Probably a story that you've heard before. A young girl was walking along a beach, and thousands of starfish had been washed up during a terrible storm. And when she had come to each little starfish as she was walking up the beach, she would pick it up and she would throw it back into the ocean. And people were kind of sitting up on their beach chairs, and they were watching in amusement and kind of chuckling a little bit at this little girl's behavior. And she'd been doing this for some time when an older gentleman approached her, and he said, "Little girl," he said, "why are you doing this? You can't make a difference. You can't save all these starfish. You can't begin to make a difference. There's thousands of these things. You'll never have time to do that." And the little girl was crushed and kind of suddenly deflated a little bit. But after a few moments, she pulled herself together, and she bent down and she picked up another starfish, and she flung it as far as she could into the ocean. And she looked up the man and said, "Well, for that one, I made a difference." And that's usually where I hear the story stop. But in reading the story, trying to figure out who wrote the story or where that story came about, it says that the old man looked at the girl inquisitively and thought about what she had done and what she had said, and inspired, he began to join her in her endeavors of throwing the starfish back in the sea. And as he began, others began, and the beach was cleared of the starfish. And so that's a neat little story. Again, I did a little research. It's Lauren Isley's story. She wrote it in 1968. Is it true? I couldn't find out if it was true or if there was some semblance of truth to it, but she wrote that story in 1968. And again, I think it's even more inspiring to me hearing it that others joined in her endeavors to make differences to those starfish. And so she said, "I made a difference to that one," right? And so the title is To Make a Difference. And if I were to take a poll of you today, and I just walked around the pews and I said, "Hey, well, would you like to make a difference? Would you like to make somebody feel special today? Would you like to leave the world a better place?" I doubt in our conversation we get very many no's. No, I don't want to do that. I don't care to make others feel good. I don't care to make a difference. I don't care to leave any kind of a legacy. The Bible's filled with people who made a difference, people that left a legacy. Again, we've been 13 weeks through Women of the Bible series. John's been doing that, and so we've seen women that he's talked about, women like Rahab, women like Ruth and Naomi, Esther, Priscilla. And then, of course, there's men of the Bible. We can look through Hebrews, the faith chapter, and we see people like Moses and David. And then we get stories of the New Testament of Peter and Paul. And you could go on and you could grab your favorite story, and you'll see that there are lots of people in the Bible that left a legacy. Lots of people that we still study and reach out to today. And then there's other people in the Bible that are just fillers. They're just there to tie one story to the other. Did you know that there are 186 names mentioned in the Bible one time? 186 people that are just mentioned one time. They're mentioned usually in genealogies, or sometimes they may have helped in a small role in some story, but they are only mentioned one time. Now, some of those people live very long times. There's a man who's mentioned more than one time by the name of Methuselah. And if I said that, you immediately probably thought about the one thing that you know about Methuselah. What's the one thing? He's the oldest man in the Bible, right? He lived 969 years. But other than who his father was and who his son was and how he fits into the genealogy, that's all we know about him. He lived 969 years, and the Bible doesn't record another event other than he was the oldest man that ever lived. How would you like to get to heaven and you walk up and you meet somebody and say, well, hello, Rahab. What you did for those spies, that was awesome, and that's really great. And then, nice to meet you, Esther. I can't believe the courage that you had to walk in front of the king unannounced and save your people. Oh, Mr. Moses, sir, it's a pleasure to meet you. It's such a pleasure that you... How did you part the Red Sea? How did that feel when you saw the wall of water and leading the people all those years and going up on the mountain? And how did that all feel to you? And Peter, I didn't get a chance to mention it at the pearly gates, but I want to see, like, how was the day of Pentecost when thousands were baptized after you said those great words? How did that feel? Oh, Mr. Methuselah, I wish you could have hung on 31 more years and you got a full 1,000. Right? So we see that, and in all fairness to Methuselah, just because that there's nothing written about the things he did doesn't mean he was a bad guy, doesn't mean he was a good guy. We just don't get the story of what he may or may not have done. And so, how can we make a difference? How can we make a difference today? And hopefully we'll see maybe a little bit later, how can we make an eternal difference? Because the people that we just mentioned, even Methuselah, we're still talking about in 2024. Think about that. If 2,000 years later, or 3,000 years later, in some instances, we talk about some of these people that maybe they'd even talk about us. Now, I'm not talking about maybe making that kind of difference, but we do want to look to make a difference. And the first thing, it seems obvious, but the first thing you have to do to make a difference, you have to want to make a difference. And that sounds simple enough, and most scholars would say that want to make a difference, that drive to make a difference. I forgot to set my clock. Again, another rookie mistake. We don't have the clock, and there's no danger. Let me just go ahead and stop right there. There's no danger of me going much past 12. I do run past Sunday school, but 12's getting close to lunchtime. And so if you've ever seen a heavy preacher, you know that you're going to get out around lunchtime. We're not going in the 1 o'clock hour, right? So I did set my clock so we'll get out. But you have to want to make a difference. And so the difference that some people they call that passion, right? You have to have a passion. You have to care about somebody. But where does it come from? Where does that want to come from? I believe it's born in us to want to do that. Again, if I went around and said, that would you want to? I think everybody would say yes, but really, where does that drive come from? What motivated those great people that we talked about to make a difference, to want to make a difference? And I believe that it begins, and I believe it ends with love. I believe that's where it all starts. When we want to make a difference, is because we love somebody. John does so much, and if you ever stop and think about what he does for a church, there are a lot of things, like obviously the sermon on Sundays is at the forefront, but do you know that we have a church website? How many people knew we had a church website? Visit the website and see. If you've been to the website, Do you know what's at the top of the website? This is the header. I took a screenshot of our website, and he keeps that up for us. He posts the sermons there. He posts them on YouTube. So it's just another thing that he does in the background. But at the top, he has the heading that says, Love God and Love People. And of course, that's a summary of Matthew 22, 37 through 39. And in that verse it says, Jesus replied, Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. So you see, if we go back and we look at what Moses did, he loved God so much that he was willing to go face Pharaoh. Now, was he willingly going? We could talk about that. We could have a discussion that he was reluctant to do that, but he loved God so much, had the fear of God so much that he would go back and face Pharaoh and lead his people out of Egypt. And he loved his fellow people enough that once he come down the mountain and he saw that they were worshiping the idol and God was going to do away with his people, he said, well, just take me out of the book of life too. Because he loved his people so much, he stood up for them in that circumstance. And a leader like that was what was required to do the job set before him. Esther, she loved her people so much that she was willing to risk her own life by going into the king's chamber unannounced and going in front of the king. Peter and Paul were thrown in jail, among other things, beaten and stoned and shipwrecked and things of that nature. But they were there preaching the gospel, trying to bring people to salvation. And again, the root of that was love, so that none would perish. The desire to make a difference in another human life starts with loving God and loving his created people. The second thing that's needed to make a difference is you actually have to do something that makes a difference. You have to do something that makes a difference. So to want to make a difference is great, and that's where it starts, but the want is not enough. We can want all day. We can have these grand thoughts. We can have these think tanks like we have in January, and we can have these inspired ideas, but until action happens, nothing great is going to happen. No legacy will be built. No impact will be made in anybody's life with a good intention. There has to be action for there to be impact. There has to be action for there to be impact. There's so many ways that we can make a difference. Oftentimes, we don't even know the impact that even the smallest act of kindness can have in a person's life. We don't know the day they're having. We don't know the situation they're in. And sometimes a smile and a hug can change a person's life. We don't oftentimes get to see it. Other times we do get to see the benefit of the fruits of our labor. Nevertheless, the Bible's pretty clear, especially the New Testament. Paul talks about how we can use our gifts for service, and that each of us have our individual gifts. He talks about the body and how the parts of the body come together to unite and make the body, and the roles as parts of the body and those individual parts form one body. And he talks about that in a couple of his letters. 1 Peter 4:10 says this: each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. Each of you. It doesn't say some of us. Think about that. You can take your name and replace that with each of you. You should say, Tommy should use whatever gift you have received to serve others. It's not really an optional thing. It's not something that we get to pick and choose and say, it's some of us have those gifts. It says, no, each of you have those gifts. And we're to use those gifts, whatever they may be, and we're all different in our gifts and our abilities and our talents, and it's up to us to figure out that. And I think that drive and that purpose will help lead us to that. But you're to use whatever gift you have received. God gave you a gift. When he knit you in the womb, he gave you a gift to help serve others. To apply that gift, to show love, and as a faithful steward of God's grace. We talked about grace before, and that's getting something that you don't deserve. And God gives us great gifts a lot of times that we don't deserve. And so we are faithful stewards of his grace. We are his feet here on this earth. We're to use our gifts to serve others. And when we do that, we become the hands and feet of God. We put his love into action. Jesus said in Matthew 25, He said, when we feed the hungry, when we clothe the needy, when we visit the sick or in prison, we did it for the least of him. You remember that? He talks about the judgment. And then, he said, when did you do that? He said, well, when you did it for the least of those, you did it for me. And those that didn't do it, he said, you didn't do it for me. And that's when he says, turn away from me, I knew you not. Right? And those that will plead, Lord, Lord. And so the final judgment, he talks about those that done this for the least of me, we did it, or least of those, we did it for him. If you've ever felt far away from Jesus, I suggest go serve somebody. Because he said, there he is, right? If you serve somebody, then you're serving him. And there are numerous ways to serve. There are big tasks that need to be done, and there are many tasks that need to be done, and there are roles within the church. Getting communion ready this morning is a service to the church. Sunday school teachers, the nursery. Think about that. The nursery is a service because it allows a parent the time and ability to sit and listen to John, and it could impact that family in a way that we can't measure, and just because we have the nursery. Children's church, the flowers that we have, the decorations show that we care, and it sets a tone of how this church is. We serve each other in community. Not just this church, but we serve the community by calls, cards, visits, things of that nature, meals when loved ones or people in the community pass away. You made a difference this morning by your attendance. When, again, they asked me to fill in, I knew John wasn't going to be here, I knew Jason wasn't going to be here, but as we start talking and visiting, and Sherry and I talked about how many people are out today, and it just kind of hit at one time, and it does weigh on you a little bit as you're preparing. Well, like, who's going to be there, and is there enough people? So your attendance has been a blessing to me this morning. It's been an encouragement to me, but more than that, your attendance this morning has set a precedent. It has told somebody in and around your life, whether that be a spouse, a child, a co-worker, a friend, that church attendance is important to you. So just by the act of coming here this morning, you've served in that way. You've told somebody that this is important to you. And so use those gifts, and there are many others. There's tithing, there's teaching, there's all kinds of gifts that we have and ways that we can apply ourselves and serve God. But the important thing is that we take action. It's not just an idea. It's not just a want to or desire. We actually have to take action to make those differences happen. The third thing that we do is that we do it with people that make a difference. Think about that. Any great thing that's ever been accomplished, great thing, has had help. One is too small a number to achieve greatness. We think about that. God intended humans to be a part of a community since the very beginning. When he created Adam, he looked around and he said it's not good for Adam to be alone, and so he created a helpmate for Adam. And then there's this community that's a husband and a wife and a child, and we call that today, we call that a family. And that's a community of itself. The Israelites, from the very beginning of their existence, when God called them out of Egypt, they were to be a community together. They were to worship together. They were to be like-minded. They were set apart to show God's favor on their lives, the one true God. And so they were a community. They were called to be a community. The rules that they were gave to them were so that they could interact as a community. The church is not just the building that we come assemble to this morning. We talk about the church and going to church. But we know, and John has said many times, the church is just a building. The church is really a community of believers. It's not just a place where we meet on Sunday morning or Wednesday nights and special events. It is a community of believers. We are the church. And so we're looking back at our list of those impactful characters that we talked about, and we see that all of those had a supporting cast. Moses didn't do those things alone. His father-in-law, his brother, his sister, Joshua, they were there helping him. Esther had Mordecai. We had that story a couple weeks ago, and he helped guide her and give good advice. Peter had the other disciples and apostles to encourage him. Paul had many helpers throughout his missionary journeys and while he was in prison. He writes about those that helped him along his way. But it can't be just people. It has to be the right kind of people. It has to be like-minded people. It has to be people that want to make a difference. So when we unite, when we all want to make a difference, we unite with a common purpose, then great things can be accomplished. Not everybody will be willing to serve, and that's okay. If those that don't serve, they become dead weight in the ministry. Think about this. If we hit the ball and drag Charlie, and then we hit the ball and we drag Charlie, and we hit the ball and we drag Charlie, pretty soon we're going to get frustrated and we're going to want to hit Charlie. Right? That dead weight, pretty long, we become frustrated, and so it's okay. Now, does that mean that Charlie is not going to be willing to serve forever? No. The Bible again gives us examples of people who were reluctant to serve, but ended up coming around and serving in big capacities. One of those at the forefront of that, think about Jonah. He ran from God, right? And eventually, with some persuasion from God, he ended up saving a city. He was unwilling at first to serve, but through some persuasion from God, he ended up serving a city. We can look at Mark. John Mark in Acts went on the first missionary journey with Paul and Barnabas. He deserted them, went back to Jerusalem, wanted to go on the second missionary journey, and Paul said, absolutely not. I'm not taking you along, and we're not going through that again. And yeah, he ended up going with Barnabas, but later on, he was reconciled to Paul. And Paul says in his letter to Timothy, while he's chained up and facing death, he said, bring Mark with you, because he's a great help to me in my ministry. And so we see that through some time and some healing and reconciliation, Mark was able to serve Paul and alongside Paul and accomplish the ministry that they together set out before. So just because they're unwilling now doesn't mean that they're unwilling forever, but go with people, because great things can be accomplished when we do it together. And then the fourth thing that we need to do to make a difference is to go at a time that makes a difference. The secret to success is determined by what we do daily, not by what we do on Sunday morning or Wednesday night, but each and every day. We tend to over-exaggerate yesterday. We tend to look back at some of the great things we've done, and we stick out our chest and all the things that we've accomplished, and over-exaggerate a little bit of how great they were. If we tend to over-exaggeration about yesterday, that pales in comparison to how we overestimate tomorrow. Think about what I just said. We overestimate tomorrow. How many times you said, I'll do that tomorrow? And then tomorrow comes, you said, I'll do that tomorrow. And then you have 3 or 4 things that you're going to do tomorrow, and you don't have enough time to get them all done, right? So we overestimate tomorrow and what can be done tomorrow. Again, nothing comes with good intentions. And so today is the day that we should go. You can't eat good intentions if you're hungry. Good intentions won't clothe you, keep you warm if you're cold. And they won't bring you encouragement if you're sick. Again, action needs to take place, and it needs to take place at the correct time. James chapter 4:17 says, if anyone then knows the good they ought to do and doesn't do it, it is a sin for them. And we know James is filled with works, and he believes that you'll show your salvation through your works. But he says if you know the good that you ought to do and you don't do it, then it's a sin for you. The best time to make a difference is when there's a need. And the easiest example I can have of that is a Band-Aid. I wouldn't walk up right now and say, Sawyer, here's a Band-Aid. You got a cut this morning, son? Nope. So what good would a Band-Aid do for him? There's no need for a Band-Aid. But then also, if he gets a cut and we wait till it heals up and there's a scab or a scar, what good is the Band-Aid then? The need has already passed. And so we need to make a difference at a time that will make a difference. Time's our most valuable asset. We think about that, and I think about the things that we can use our money for and buy, all these things. But time is something we can't get back, and we must learn to guard our time. I think we live in a day and age where we have things that compete for our time more than any time throughout history, with all the devices and things and activities and things that we have in our lives. So we must guard our time so that we're available at the correct time to make a difference. So the 4 things: we have to want to make a difference, to do something to make a difference, with people that want to make a difference, at a time that'll make a difference. Let me take a moment to tell you about a man that made the biggest difference. He was born in an obscure village. He grew up in another small town. Worked as a carpenter until he was about 30 years old. Traveled around preaching with his friends for 3 years. But all the while never being more than 200 miles from where he was born. Never wrote a book. Never held office. Didn't have a TV show. Didn't have a podcast. And would you believe it? He didn't have not even one follower on social media. But today, Jesus is still the central figure of the human race. Still the most important human to ever walk on the face of the earth 2,000 years later. The greatest thing that I can do for you, or for anyone of that matter, in your life would be to introduce you to him. And likewise, the greatest thing you could ever do for somebody to make a difference would be to introduce them to Jesus Christ. Now, we went from, oddly enough, from service to sharing the gospel. And that was a quick transition and do that. So you may be wondering how the two go together. And I believe they can't be even more intertwined than this. In 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 19, Paul writes these words. Though I am free and belong to no one, I have made myself a slave to everyone to win as many people as possible. That's the NIV version. The MSG, the Message version, summarizes it like this. It says, even though I am free of the demands and expectations of everyone, I have voluntarily become a servant to any and all in order to reach a wide range of people. So here's one of Paul's secrets to sharing the gospel, and it's serve people. He goes on to describe the people he served. He talks about serving Jews. He became like a Jew to serve the Jews. He became like a Gentile to serve the Gentiles. He became like one without the law. He became one that was the law. He became weak to serve the weak, to reach out to the weak. It didn't matter to Paul their background, their social status, their bank account, who their friends were, what they could do for him. Right? It's simply put, like the Message version says, any and all. And he served voluntarily. And he did so to reach a wide range of people. He became like them, around them, assimilated with them. He cared more about connection with those people than he did about correction with those people. Now, did correction come? Can we look at his letters and we obviously see that Paul wrote to correct some false ideas and things that are going on in the church? Yes. But he cared about the connection first so the correction could come. He knew that they wouldn't care how much he knew until they knew how much he cared. And he did that. He showed that his love to them by serving them. So I'll leave you this thought. The Bible says that you're fearfully and wonderfully made. You're unique. You're not a random sample of DNA that's been thrown together. There's only one of you. God knit you in the womb and he gave you a fingerprint that no one else has. Think about that. You leave your fingerprints on something, right? They say they can identify you. You have a fingerprint that no one else has. So that you can leave an imprint that no one else can. It's never too late to leave that imprint. There are people that only you have certain influence with. There are people that only, or places that only you can get in, doors that only you can open. And the greatest compliment that you could ever receive is when you walk through the pearly gates, you meet someone and they say, you know what? I'm here because of you. That's an eternal difference. That person would be in eternity because of you. Some of those things, the foundation of those things, are acts of kindness. Rookie mistake. Fingerprint. The greatest compliment that you can receive would be there. And it may be because you served it. Maybe you're not the one that actually shared the gospel, but you laid the foundation. You were John the Baptist. You laid the foundation by serving somebody and showing Christ and his love there. You served them, and they're there because you love them, and they're there because you, and definitely they're there because you shared the gospel with them. As we close this morning and we think about our hymn of invitation, I want to offer that invitation to anyone this morning. Anybody that would like to know more about Jesus, and I look through the audience and looking and don't feel like we're going to have anybody answer that invitation, right? I'm looking and seeing that maybe there are, but the greatest thing that you can do is be introduced today to Jesus Christ, to make him Lord and Savior of your life, to to put him in that place to where he can make a difference in your life, and then you can in turn make a difference in others. So as we close today, Amy will go ahead and sing that song. And another rookie mistake, I left my hymnal here. So as we stand and sing, the invitation will be given to you. Hymn number 173, Are You Washed in the Blood?